Hello, my name's Tim Healing, and I'm a project management consultant who specializes in heritage and social action projects in the Middle East, North Africa, Gulf, and Central Asian regions. Today, I'm going to show you how to set up a critical path diagram, which is a very useful tool for any project you're working on, really. And it follows on from my previous presentation, how to set up a work breakdown structure. If you haven't watched that video, I suggest you watch that first. This one follows on directly from it. So what is a critical path diagram, and why is it such a useful tool for a project manager? Well, it helps you find the activity sequence of your project that will take the longest time to complete. So this helps you calculate the actual length of time your project needs to reach a successful conclusion. This activity sequence becomes the critical path, or the longest path from start to finish. So it gives you an understanding of the risks, the time needed, and the activities of your project. So this is a very simple critical path diagram, and as you may notice, it has nothing to do with heritage or social action projects, but very much how to do with how to cook a lasagna. And the time method we're going to use for this is actually in minutes. But first of all, we're going to look at the different activities, the different tasks involved in cooking a lasagna. And there's some tasks that are dependent on other tasks, such as draining the noodles in the top line. You can't drain the noodles until you've boiled them. So that's reliant on you actually boiling the noodles. And you can't layer the lasagna until you've cooked and drained the noodles and browned the meat and mixed the cheese sauce. So you have, as well as the dependent tasks, you also have the independent tasks or concurrent tasks. So mixing the cheese filling, for example, you can do that while you're boiling and draining the noodles, and you won't waste any time waiting for the noodles to cook, so you can continue with the project and save time that way. Once you've laid out the tasks in the necessary order, the correct order of things, and how one thing needs to be done after another to create the perfect end to the project, then you can start to add estimated times. And as I said, we're doing this in minutes. So I've input the times I consider that it will take to do each of these activities. And once you do that, you can clearly see which of the three paths in this case will take the longest to achieve. So we can see that the boiling of the noodles, the draining of the noodles before we get to layering the lasagna takes a lot longer than browning the meat and adding the pasta sauce, and even mixing the cheese filling. So the browning of the meat and the mixing of the cheese filling are the concurrent tasks. The critical path, which is the longest path, is boiling the noodles, draining the noodles, until they all converge on layering the lasagna. Now I've highlighted the critical path now in orange, the orange arrows at the top. And if you add up all those numbers, the 30 minutes, the 2 minutes, the 10 minutes, the 45 minutes, that all comes to 87 minutes before the project ends. So I can say now with some confidence that this project, How to Cook a Lasagna, should take around 87 minutes to complete. So returning to the work breakdown structure I showed you for our heritage project, the photographic documentation training, this is the WBS that we came up with. And as you can see, the tasks are clearly laid out. Now we're going to be mainly concerned with the lower down tasks. That's the nitty-gritty of the project, and those are the ones in blue. Now I've taken away the arrows and I've turned the project tasks down from going vertically just to run across the page horizontally, and that's just for ease's sake. So what I would normally do is to put the tasks that are in blue. I wouldn't actually first off put them on a computer like this. I would probably write them on post-it notes, stick them on the wall or on a large sheet of paper, and try and work out with my colleagues what the natural progression of these tasks is, which are the dependent tasks, which are independent tasks, and then try and create a critical path. So I can take away now the top tier labels for the WBS, because the real, as I said, the nitty gritty is in the blue labels, and that's how we are going to devise the critical path. Now I've rearranged them into an order, and we're reading this horizontally, working from left to right, starting with the planning, training, and ending with the shipping of the equipment. So this is the order I feel that the project should progress logically. And I'm adding a start and a finish, the finish being the Jordan training, so the start of the project and the finish of the project. And I'm connecting the tasks with arrows, with lines, just so we can see what has to be done before the next task. Now, I wouldn't have done this probably alone. I'd have done it with my colleagues who are involved in the project, because that way you get the best idea of what needs to be done in areas that you're not necessarily an expert in. And one of the things that possibly might come up is to be reminded that, well, we need to get permissions before we ship the equipment. So I needed to slip that in, but of course that can be done at the same time as we're working on the training manual. So those run concurrently, but they still both have to be done before we actually ship the equipment. So having colleagues chip in and working on this is really important. So the next step is to put in times that I think each activity will take. And of course, this is a much more complicated project, so we're working in weeks as opposed to minutes as we were with the cooking lasagna project. So again, we've highlighted which area we think is going to be the critical path, and again, it's the top line, and I've highlighted that in orange. So these are estimated times, and I'll talk about that in a short period of time, how we come to those. But again, once we've highlighted the times in weeks that we think each activity will take, we can then look very clearly at what the critical path is and how long it'll take, and this time it'll take 27 weeks. That's 1 week to plan the training, 2 weeks to identify the equipment, 6 weeks to purchase the equipment, 2 weeks to test it, 12 weeks for permissions, and 4 weeks to ship the equipment before we end up in Jordan. So that's a total of 27 weeks. So I'm often asked, how do I calculate the time needed for individual tasks? And it's not an exact science, to be honest, but I'll look at previous projects I've worked on, and I've worked in the Middle East before, I've worked on very similar projects, and I've worked in Jordan, so I have a fair idea how long some of these activities will take. For those that I don't know, I will ask colleagues and experts who have a better understanding. For example, buying the equipment we need for the training, I'll talk to my colleagues in imaging or photographic experts and find out how long they think it would take to get this equipment. Now you can also look at known data. For example, the Ministry of Interior recommend that it'll take 6 weeks to get a visa for someone from Iraq to Jordan, and that's on their website, so that's known data. Another example of that from the How to Cook Lasagna project would be, look at the packet. It says that it takes 45 minutes to cook the lasagna once it's ready. That is known data. And the last thing you can do is quite frankly, guesswork. This isn't obviously ideal, but sometimes, you have to give it your best guess. In those situations, it's better to slightly overestimate than underestimate. The problem can be if you estimate too low, then you run the risk of not allowing yourself enough time for the project. And if you estimate too high, then you have long periods of inactivity between tasks, things can be forgotten, and it can highlight risks that weren't otherwise known to you. So it's best to calculate an average time between what is the expected time and the worst case scenarios. Now, for an example with the participant visas, we know that the Ministry of Interior said that it'll take 6 weeks for a visa to come through. But the worst case scenario is that it might take 10 weeks for a visa. So we then take the average, and that would be 8 weeks. So that's what we put in the critical path diagram. Now, this is important because you're not always, as a project manager, given the opportunity to devise how long a project is from start to finish. You can calculate it, but sometimes the stakeholder wants a project done by January 5th and it's already October. So the problem with this is that you have a set amount of time to do it. But if you need to highlight and show the stakeholder why it cannot be done in the time that they decided that it should be, the critical path diagram is a good way of showing it to them. And counter to that, if they still insist that it needs to be done, again, you've covered your back and you've shown them how long this project you consider it will take. Now, you as a good project manager might still be able to make it happen to their timescale, but they will have to understand that it might need to cut some corners. The project might be not quite as detailed as they want. Certain people might not be able to attend the training. So, you've made your case, but as a good project manager, you're still in it and you're still moving forward to make sure it happens. So you've now developed your critical path diagram and you can see how long your project will take. So what's the next step? So maybe you want to put the information into a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is another project management tool. This is particularly useful in building projects and in business-related projects. It's used quite a lot. I don't always use it, I'll admit, for heritage projects. Sometimes the critical path diagram is enough. But either way, you have the opportunity now. You can see clearly who should be doing what tasks, and you can start allocating tasks to individuals. As I said before, if there's not enough time allocated for the project, you can discuss this with the donor or other stakeholders. But it also allows you the opportunity to look at the risks to the project. You'll be able to see them clearly now and develop a plan for coping with them. By this I mean, if you have someone who is working with you who is, by looking at the critical path diagram, working on concurrent projects, that's a risk. He might not be able to focus on both of them. But either way, you're now aware of it and you can develop a plan for coping with that situation. You also need to start allocating firm costs to each element, and that's easier to do now. Now you know what you're actually dealing with, and you should be ready to start the project plan in full detail now and actually write it up so it can be presented and you can start working on your project. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. My name is Tim Healing. I'm a project consultant with Tim Healing Project Management LLC. If you like this, please note that below in the comments. And if you want to see any other project management tools discussed, then please mention that also. You can also visit me and make comments on my Facebook business page, Tim Healing Project Management LLC. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Next, I'll be producing a video on the project cycle method for working through a project, and you'll see how the work breakdown structure and critical path diagram fit into running a project. Thank you very much.